Good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to begin in just a minute when we have a few more people join us. I'm so glad to see so many people joining into the webinar. We'll begin shortly. Thank you for logging on. We will begin in just a minute. Hello, my name is Leah Miller, and we are so delighted that you joined our call today to learn more about the request for proposals and the informational session. I am the director at the JFNA Center on Holocaust Survivor Care and Institute on Aging and Trauma. Next slide, please. And I want a chance to introduce my colleagues. Shelley.
Hi, my name is Shelley Rude-Wernick. I'm the Managing Director of our Center on Holocaust Survivor Care and Institute on Aging and Trauma. Thank you for joining us.
And Amanda.
Hi there. I'm Amanda Jarvis. I'm the Project Manager for the Center. It's great to be here with everyone.
Thanks. Next slide, please. So as a result of participating in this webinar, you'll learn how to summarize the most important aspects of the application, identify what is new in this RFP, list all the required components to complete an application, recall how to submit an application via the application software called Foundant Technologies, and know and find the resources needed to complete the application. Next slide, please. So first, we're going to start off with an overview of the RFP and program guidelines. The RFP is the request for proposals. Then we're going to focus on Foundant, and then we're going to skim over the application, and you'll have a chance to ask questions at the end of the webinar. And in the meantime, I encourage you to put questions in the QA box at the bottom of the screen. You can submit them at any time throughout the entire webinar, and we will save them until the end. This webinar will be recorded, and the recording and this PowerPoint will be posted onto our website next week. Next slide, please. I just wanted to thank the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration on Aging, and Administration for Community Living for this grant. And also our generous donors who have also helped supply us with money that we hope to get out the door to you. Next slide, please. First, what's going to be helpful is if you pull up the RFP and you have it at your fingertips at the same time that we're going over this. And you can see I'm just going to skim through the whole thing. So as you can see, the very first section is grant overview. So if you can pull that up and we'll get on our way. Next slide, please. First, the grant mission is to expand the nation's capacity to provide person-centered trauma-informed care to Holocaust survivors, older adults with a history of trauma, and their family caregivers. And we do this in two ways. One is to award subgrants to develop person-centered trauma-informed programs for those populations. And the other is to increase the knowledge and skills of aging service providers so that they can implement person-centered trauma-informed care. Next slide, please. So person-centered trauma-informed care is a holistic approach to service delivery that promotes trust, dignity, strength, and empowerment of all individuals by incorporating the knowledge about trauma into agency programs, policies, and procedures. To learn more about it, please see section 1.4. Next slide, please. And this grant focuses on serving at least one of these service populations. Holocaust survivors, older adults with a history of trauma, or family caregivers. And you can find the definitions in section 1.6 of each of these populations. Next slide, please. We also, the grant can help as a bifactor supporters of service populations. However, if you serve these populations, it has to be in addition to helping the service populations. And so professional service providers would be social workers, case managers, CNAs, anyone who is paid for their services. Next slide, please. So this is for the innovations program. And the question we often get asked is, what is an innovation? So it is something that is new. Projects can be innovative for the field, the agency, or the program. So what's new in your city may not be new in another city and vice versa. Applicants, if you are a current subgrantee or have been a past subgrantee, applicants will be required to detail what is different from existing projects, and even for new agencies as well. So you can build on what you already have or expand it. Next slide, please. This is new to our RFP that we have not done before. We're really focusing on projects, and you can have anywhere between 1 project and 5 projects. And a project is a set of activities or tasks that must be completed to arrive at a particular outcome or impact. And a project could be composed of many different tasks for multiple service populations. I suggest that you read the section defining the project carefully. Next slide, please. Focusing on eligibility. If your agency does not meet any one of these eligibility requirements, you are not eligible to apply. They must meet all eligibility requirements. And it's also noteworthy that agencies can only be a part of 1 proposal. So if you are applying to be a subgrantee in 1 proposal, you cannot be a sub-subgrantee in another proposal. And we'll talk more about that later. But for eligibility, please read section 1.3. And these are going to also be in the intent to apply to verify that you are eligible to apply. Next slide, please. These are the categories of services that you can propose in your application. Also, there may be something that we didn't think of that you're welcome to include, and you'll see these listed in section 1.5. Next slide, please. The next section is section 2, where we're focusing on the funding awards. Next slide, please. You can apply for a grant from JF&A for $45,000 to $300,000 for each program year. We consider this a 2-year program, and so you're going to have to propose a 2-year budget. Whatever you apply for in year 1, it will also be what you are applying for in year 2. Awards include money from the federal government and from JF&A's fundraising efforts, so it's important that you abide by all federal standards that are listed in the RFP. I want to make a note that not to inflate budget requests as a precaution for possible reduced funding awards. The review committee, which is an independent experts that do not work for JF&A, are going to review applications, and it's more important that your application has a sound amount of funding, and as well JF&A staff. Next slide, please. For the funding limitations, I suggest that you read carefully section 2.2. I just pulled out a few of them here. What is new is that you must provide direct services to Holocaust survivors, older adults with history of trauma, and their family caregivers. But you can also provide PCTI training, or you can also provide counseling to supporters of service populations. So counseling for certified nursing assistants, for example. We put a clarified definition of what basic research is. And we also have more clarifications on income maintenance, insurance, and fundraising. So I suggest you read this carefully before you settle in on your idea for the proposal. Next slide, please. For the match requirements, subgrantees are required to contribute a minimum match that is equal to 25% of the total grant budget. The minimum match is calculated by dividing the JF&A funds requested by 3. So please read what cannot be used towards JF&A as a match. It's noteworthy that match can be either funds that you raise, or else it can also be in kind. And JF&A does not favor overmatch applications. So if overmatch is if you get more match than what is required, that is considered overmatch. Next slide, please. Expectations and compliance is section 3 in your RFP. And we're going to just go to section 3.1 about expectations of subgrantees. We expect you to begin your projects on January 1, 2024 to start implementing. We expect you to spend down the total program budget by the end of year 2 and participate in technical support activities throughout your period. I encourage you to read section 3.3 for information about the SAM registration and unique entity ID. Next slide, please. Here are the reports that we require over the course of the 2-year grants. So this should help you decide whether you have the capacity and what staff capacity you'll need for this grant proposal. So I suggest you look over section 3.2 for more information about this. Next slide, please. Applications and review process, section 4. Next slide, please. Here is the application timeline. You can already cross off the informational session that you are participating in right now. I want you to note that the intent to apply is due February 16th, 2023. There are no extensions on that. Next slide, please. As far as the intent to apply goes, you cannot submit an application without submitting an intent to apply. However, you can submit an intent to apply and not submit an application. So I encourage you to be safe rather than sorry. In order to submit an application, you go to agingandtrauma.org, scroll 3/4 of the way down the page, and you'll see a blue banner that says now accepting applications for the innovations program. You click on learn more and then apply now. And then after completing apply, you will receive a submission confirmation email. And when you hear from my colleague Amanda about Founded, you'll learn more of the details of how to do so. It's noteworthy that the content of the intent to apply, you don't need to have your idea for the proposal yet. We're not asking any questions about what you are going to propose. We only want to determine whether your agency is eligible and to have the contact information of the agency. This will help us compose our independent review committee. Next slide, please. Here, this is probably one of the most important slides in the entire deck because this really tells you what what a complete application looks like. It requires the basic information, which is essentially your contact information and the executive summary. It also includes the program questionnaire, which we're going to go over all these other parts, the budget application questionnaire, which is actually a workbook that has the budget questionnaire, the master budget, and project budgets all included in it. A work plan is also required. And then finally, financial documentation. All of this can be found in section 4.3. You cannot expect your application to be reviewed unless it is all complete when it is submitted. It's noteworthy that we don't expect you to write the entire application in one sitting. You are able to pause and go back to it multiple times. Next slide, please. The review process. We have a volunteer review committee, and these volunteers are experts in the field of refugee resettlement, program management, domestic violence with older adults, really experts in aging and trauma all around. And they're the ones who are going to be reviewing your application. You can tell what questions to spend more time on by which questions are worth more points. And it's noteworthy that there are, for each project that you have, and again, you can submit 1 to 5 projects, it will not alter your score if you have 5 projects or if you have 1 project. The application categories, you can apply if you are a current or past subgrantee. We are also welcoming new agencies that we have never worked with before. We are really trying to diversify our cohort. Funding decisions are made based on application scores, diversity of agency size, service populations, geographic region, service category. We really just want anyone who is going to help us meet the overall goals of the innovations program. Next slide, please. Now you're going to turn to section 5, the application completion. I'd like to hand it over to my colleague Amanda to go over the Founded training.
Thank you, Leah. Hi there. Everyone's favorite topic is always new technology. We're going to go through some background on Founded Technologies, which is a software program that we use to host the application. So if you have previously created an account to apply for the JFNA Fig Tree grant, the grant from the last cycle, you do not need to create a new account on Foundant to apply for the Grapevine grant. You already have an account and you can use that. If you have never created an account on Foundant or created an account on Foundant to apply for a grant not related to JFNA, you will need to create a new account, and we'll get into that later. You can find the application portal on our website, agingandtrauma.org. The page is titled Call for Applications. Leah explained how to get to the exact page earlier. So you'll click that link. The link is also embedded here. This recording is going to be sent out, so you can always access it through this slide. To begin, you'll click Create New Account, and you'll complete registration, see the system for the first time. You'll land on something called the Applicant Dashboard. This will look familiar to you if you're used to applying for grants. Many grant websites have an applicant dashboard. And you will be able to preview the application without saving any work by clicking Preview. Next slide, please. So we're going to watch a video together. Please stick with us. The video will explain a lot of the technical background of getting a Foundant account, and we'll show you what each page of the process will look like so that you know what to expect when you click the link and start doing your own application. Next slide, please. Will you press play? Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to the grant application tutorial. In this video, we'll walk you through the grant registration and application workflow. We'll also show you how to navigate your dashboard and manage any existing requests. To get started, click the link provided to you by the organization offering the grants. We recommend that you bookmark this page for ease of access when applying or managing your requests with this organization. If you've already created an account, enter your email address and password and click Log On. You can also click Forgot Your Password to reset your password if needed. If you haven't created an account yet, click Create New Account. This brings you to the registration pages, where you're first asked to enter information about your organization. Required fields are marked with an asterisk. Next, enter your contact information. In the next section, if you're the executive officer for your organization, select Yes. If you're not, select No and complete any required fields. Finally, enter a password and click Create Account. You should receive an automated email confirming your account registration. Making sure that you received this email helps ensure that you'll receive other communications from this organization about your application. Now you'll arrive at the Apply page, where you can see the available grant opportunities along with any deadlines and details about each. Click Apply at any time to return to this page. If you've been provided with an access code, you can enter it in the upper right-hand corner. The page will then display that opportunity as well. For any grant opportunity on the page, click Preview to view the first form without starting a grant request. When you're ready to start a request for an opportunity, click Apply. This takes you to the first form you're asked to complete for the grant request. In most cases, this is an LOI or application form. The contact information that you gave at registration is visible at the top of the form, and you can make edits if needed. If you'd like to print a paper copy of the form, click Question List. If there's a deadline to submit the form, take note of it here as well. Any required questions on the form are marked with an asterisk, and these must be completed to submit the form. The system will let you know if you exceed any character limits, and you'll need to fit your response within the limit before you can submit. The system auto-saves your work every 100 characters you type, and when you click out of a question. You can also click Save at any time. Click LOI or Application Packet if you'd like to download a PDF copy of your completed form. If you decide to withdraw your application at any time before submitting it, you can click Abandon Request. When you're ready to submit the form, click Submit. If any required questions were missed, the system lists those for you, and you'll need to respond to those questions, then click Submit again. The form cannot be edited once it's submitted. When your form is successfully submitted, you'll see a confirmation message. Now let's talk about your dashboard, where you can access and manage any existing grant requests. Click the Home icon to reach your dashboard at any time. The Active tab contains your draft requests, submitted requests still under consideration, and any approved requests that are still active. The Historical Requests tab contains any of your other requests that are no longer active. Click View to see a form you've already submitted. A draft request gives you the option to continue working on it by clicking Edit. If your grant request is approved, you might be assigned follow-up forms to complete. Click Edit to access a follow-up form. The steps to complete and submit it are the same as with the first form for your request. For approved requests, you might also see a View Details option. This brings you to more information about your grant award. The final item we'll cover is the menu that appears by clicking your name in the upper right corner. Here you can edit your account information, change your password, and log out of the site. As you work in the site, please reach out to the organization offering the grants if you have any specific questions. Thanks for watching, and best of luck with your grant application.
Thanks so much for playing the video, and thanks everyone for watching it. I hope that that was helpful. So we're going to go over a little bit of what we covered in the video, and in case you're more of an auditory learner, we'll talk about it now. To start on the Grapevine application process, you're going to click the blue Apply button on the Apply page. Clicking Apply takes you to our Intent to Apply, what Foundant was calling the LOI, stands for Letter of Intent. Really, this is just a form to fill out that is your intention to fill out an application for this grant. You will be able to save your work and continue later if needed. And to do that, there is a Save button at the bottom of each form. And to continue filling it out, you just log back in with the credentials that you set up, the email address that you used, and a password. You click Edit, and you can edit anything before you submit it. As Leah mentioned, you must submit an intent to apply in order to fill out an application for this grant. If you submit your intent to apply, you'll receive an email from JFNA confirming the submission. If you do not see a confirmation, please check your spam folder. And if it's not in spam, please email support@foundant.com. You don't have to take copious notes. There will be another page with some more information. If JFNA determines that your organization is eligible to apply, you will receive an email from JFNA that tells you that your intent to apply has been received and that you're invited to submit a full proposal. Next slide, please. So once you've submitted the intent to apply, if it is marked eligible and you are moved to the next step of this application, you're going to use the same account, the same email address and password that you set up for your intent to apply. You're going to log back into Foundant and see your applicant dashboard. You'll scroll down to active requests and click edit application to begin filling out the Grapevine application. In order to print the completed intent to apply or the application, you just simply log back in, select the document you'd like to view, click application packet. That'll generate a printable PDF. Next slide, please. What if I need help? You may be asking yourself. So for any assistance regarding the content of the application, please reach out to us, aging@jewishfederations.org, before February 24th, which is the last day to ask questions about content and about the RFP. A link to a JFNA Fountain tutorial can be found at the following link. If you're having technical issues, here's a link to the Fountain support page, which has detailed step-by-step guides for how to apply. And for any additional technical assistance from Foundant, if you get locked out, if you have issues that seem very technical, go to foundant.com, and on the homepage, there's a chat now box on the bottom right. It looks like a question mark, and they have a really great chat system. You can set up a chat with somebody on their support team. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass this back to Leah.
Thanks, Amanda. Again, if you have any questions about anything you've heard so far, please go ahead and put them in the QA box at the bottom of the screen, and we will answer your questions at the end of this presentation. If you can turn to section 5.1 of the RFP, we're going to keep on going so that we can see what the application looks like. Next slide, please. So first is the overview section. You're going to put the amount requested for JFNA for 1 year. And you'll also see an example of what the executive summary looks like. This is not an executive summary of your agency. This is an executive summary of the project that you are proposing. You'll also see a new section that asks about the demographics of the service populations. So we want to know specifically, who are you planning to serve? Next slide, please. And I almost forgot one more thing that we're asking that is new is if we can share the proposal with other potential funders is another question we're asking, because we really want to advocate for you as best we can. And we realize that we have limited funds, and in the past, we've gotten more applications than we had funding available. Next slide, please. And now you're going to turn to section 5.2 about projects. Next slide, please. So again, this section is what's new, and maybe it'll help to give you a little background of how we got here and why we decided to put this in. We had some agencies that applied for 4 projects, and we had some agencies that literally applied for 21 projects that got funded for 21 projects. And what's really hard is to keep track of all of those projects, and we want to keep track of all of them. We want to see, we evaluate every single project to see what's successful and where there are challenges. And so it's important that we can follow everything about it. So you'll notice that in the questionnaire, we ask questions about the project, so you have to answer the same questions for each project. In the work plan, there's a work plan page for each project. There's a budget for each project. We're really trying to delineate the different projects. So we're going to ask you to name each project. And I suggest that you put a short phrase, something that explains the activity, something very clear, like food delivery. Things like community cares, where you can't tell what that is not helpful for us to track the project. It's noteworthy that the names are really for JFNA reporting. It's not for how you advertise it to your clients. And you'll see we're asked all of these questions for each project, and so it multiplies. So if you chose 1 project, you would get asked these questions once. If you chose 4 projects, you'll get asked these questions 4 times for each of the different projects to describe it. Next slide, please. Sub-grantees. So we are considered the grantee of the Administration of Community Living's grant. Whoever we fund is considered the sub-grantee. Now, in some cases, it may be that a sub-grantee decides to have sub-grantees. So there's a section just for those applicants and where we ask questions about the roles and responsibilities. You can read section 5.22 to learn more about that. Next slide, please. We'll also ask questions about the agency capacity, sustainability, and dissemination. And this is the capacity to implement and evaluate projects, and also how you're going to share lessons learned. We also want to know that you have a strategy to sustain the program. Next slide, please. I suggest that you read section 5.3 that explains how to complete the work plan. The work plan is worth 100 points. And the work plan should match the questionnaire and match the budget. So what I mean by that is if you chose a name for a project in the questionnaire, that name for the same project should match exactly in the work plan. It should match exactly in the budget as well. And if you said that in the questionnaire that you're going to, let's say, have 5 classes in a year, then that should be reflected in the work plan that there should be 5 classes. It's really important to make sure that everything is coordinated and well planned. Next slide, please. Here's just a snapshot of what the work plan, the top of it looks like. Again, I suggest you read the definitions of what a project, the outcome, key tasks, and major objectives are in section 5.3. Next slide, please. And so this is the page that you will fill out for each project. If you have one project, you will fill out this page once. If you have multiple projects, you'll see that there are different tabs and you'll fill it out for each tab. Again, you can have as a minimum of 1 project and a maximum of 5. You also, to help you in filling out the work plan, we've filled out a sample work plan. I strongly urge you to look at that so that you can see what we're looking for in the work plan and the level of detail and the level of thought that we're expecting. Next slide, please. Turn to section 5.4 of the budget application workbook. So the form auto-calculates, auto-populates, and the forms are linked together. So it's possible that you'll fill out something on one tab and it'll automatically appear on another tab in the workbook. Please read the instructions carefully in the RFP and read the instructions at the top of the page in the workbook itself. It will make it easier for you to complete. There are 8 documents in this workbook. There's the budget questionnaire, the master budget, and then 5 project budgets. So if you only have 1 project, then you would only fill out 1 project budget. Also, to submit this, you will complete this in Excel format, and then at the end, you will also save it as a PDF. We ask for you to upload the exact same document, one saved as an Excel, one as a PDF, the exact same content twice is helpful for us and our review committee. Next slide, please. If you turn to section 5.4.1, you can learn more about the budget questionnaire. Request the same amount of funding for year 1 and year 2. So if you request $300,000 for year 1, then you will also request $300,000 for year 2. Next slide, please. The budget, the master budget. It describes the 2-year budget summary. And the minimum match is auto-calculated from the JF&A workbook for ease. And otherwise, you can calculate it by using a division of 3. Next slide, please. The project budgets. As I said before, if you have 1 project, you'll fill this out once. If you have 5 projects, you'll fill this out 5 times. You don't need to have 5 projects. 5 is just the maximum that is allowed. And you're going to indicate which budget is for which project by giving it a name. And you have some examples here: yoga class, music class. Those are just a couple of things that we've funded in the past. Next slide, please. Also in the budget workbook is the budget narrative. This is where you explain the rationale of the expenses, including the sources of revenue from the matching funds. And the matching funds can be either in kind or they can be or cash. So next slide, please. So that concludes our presentation of going over the RFP and program guidelines and also going over what the application looks like as well as the technology. So I encourage you to please put any other questions that you have in the QA box at the bottom of the screen. And I will call on my colleague, Shelley Rude-Warnick, the Managing Director of the Center, to go ahead and facilitate the questions and answers.
Hi, thank you so much. I do see a lot of questions here in the Q&A section, so please go ahead and keep those questions coming. We're happy to answer as many as we can on this call. I do want to reiterate that if you have questions after this call, please email us those questions by the deadline that it says in the RFP. That deadline is February 24th. The reason why there is a deadline on asking questions such as these is because we're going to post the answers for everyone to see. This is a very transparent process. The answers that we describe on this phone call or on this webinar will also be written down and posted on our website. And it wouldn't be fair for some organizations to ask a question later on that could possibly influence, the answer to which could possibly influence how another organization would set up their proposal so late in the progress. So that is why there's that February 24th deadline for asking these types of clarifying questions. And I will reiterate that they are clarifying questions. The technical ones in nature can be answered by Foundant. These clarifying questions you can certainly ask us. We will not be able to brainstorm ideas on proposals with you, but we can certainly tell you any clarifying information such as what would be an allowable expense or what might not be an allowable expense. So with that overview, I see even more questions came in. So I'm going to get right to it. I'm going to attempt to answer these in the order that I see them on here. And so if I don't answer your question, you can wait until the end and ask it again. Okay, so the first one that I see here is, are nursing homes and assisted living facilities eligible as either a grantee or a subgrantee? Please refer to the RFP for the full list of eligibility requirements. If a nursing home or an assisted living facility meets that eligibility requirement, then they're eligible. The costs for this grant, because it comes from the Administration for Community Living, the costs cannot support someone living in a cannot go to support someone's bill of living in a nursing home or living in an assisted living facilities. It can't pay for that, but it can pay for a program, a person-centered trauma-informed program that is conducted in a nursing home or in an assisted living facility, if that makes sense. So if there is a person-centered trauma-informed program, and there have been in the past, that happen to take place in an institution, that's fine. And this grant can cover that. And we would love to see what kind of proposals come in for that. Okay, can you please post the application grant link here? I encourage you to go to agingandtrauma.org for that grant link. And if someone could put it in the chat, feel free. What does direct service provider mean? If our agency passes through money to a direct service provider as a sub-grantee, would we qualify? Yes, that is okay if there's a sub-grantee. I would say, look again at the eligibility requirements, and if your organization meets those eligibility requirements, then yes, you are eligible to apply for this. And if that doesn't answer, feel free to send us an email that describes, specifically how your organization is set up. Next question. The range, the grant amount that you could apply for has a range of $45,000 to $300,000. That is per year. So please, as Leah said, make sure to have a consistent budget of a consistent grant amount in year one and in year two. And in, if it's $45,000 that you're applying for in year one, then make it $45,000 that you're budgeting for in year two. If it's on the other extreme end, if it's $300,000 in year one, it would be $300,000 in year two. And we expect to fund a range of proposals, a range of grant sizes. It really just depends on how much, what the requests are that come in and the quality of the applications. Next question. If we receive funding from a local Jewish federation through their critical support grant funded by JFNA, can we apply for this grant for the same project? So this refers to the JFNA Center on Holocaust Survivor Care and Institute on Aging and Trauma has multiple grants that we award. This is our innovations program that we're talking about right now. The question came in from a recipient of one of our other award processes. The answer is yes, you may apply even if you do receive other JFNA funding. However, the project must be an expansion or a deepening of that initial project. It's not a straight continuation or a supplement for the funding that you already have for that project. It must be to do something new and different and expanded from the project that it is funded. And also, I note, please read the RFP about the match. You can't count JFNA funds as matched to JFNA funds, and you also can't. There's a section that talks about double dipping, meaning using JFNA funds for the exact same expenses or costs in multiple programs. You can't do that. Next question, is this a reimbursement grant? I don't know what that means, so I'm not going to answer the question. Because I don't know what that means, I think that it probably doesn't apply, but the way that we set up our funding of grantees is we have a payment schedule that we develop at the beginning of the grant period, and we inform the grantees what that payment schedule is, and grantees must submit to us quarterly budget reports, and there's a lot of back and forth working together on the budgets to be able to keep to that schedule, or if the schedule has to change, then the schedule can change based on what those reports say. Next question. Can a Jewish federation apply on behalf of some of the other organizations that they work with, or can only the organizations doing the work apply? Again, I'll point you to the eligibility requirements. If your federation meets the eligibility requirement, and I would expect that it does, then you can apply and have a sub grantee. You can also work very closely and partner with the other organization and write the grant together. It really just depends on your local situation and how you're set up, how it would be best to implement the program. Next question, what constitutes a different project? Should the same project in different locations be considered one project? Or I just lost my page. One project or somehow the order of these questions changed. But I think I get the gist. This has to do with with what constitutes a project. And I'm going to again refer to what it says in the RFP. It really depends on what the intervention is for that project and what the goals are for the project. So if you have specific questions and need that clarified, you can feel free to email us at aging@jewishfederations.org. Thank you. Okay, so let me see if I can figure out where we were back here in the questions, because for some reason they got out of order. Okay, here's a question about coming from someone who says they work on several HHS grants, Health and Human Services grants, that there's always a strong evaluation component for measuring outcomes. Is there a maximum amount of funding allowed for data collection and monitoring activities? We don't set a maximum amount of funding allowed for data collection and monitoring. We do provide a lot of assistance and support to all of our grantees in setting up their evaluations. So we emphasize project evaluation, and we'll reach out to the organizations that are funded to help set up these evaluations. But the specific question, is there a maximum amount of funding? We have not set a maximum, but please make sure that everything in your budget is reasonable. Another question, if there's an organization that has applied for or received funding in this grant program in the past, are they eligible to apply? Yes, if you're eligible, if you meet the eligibility requirements, then you are eligible to apply. It makes no difference whether you received funding in the past from JFNA or whether you did not receive funding in the past from JFNA. I will say that past compliant, if you received funding in the past from JFNA, then compliance with all grant requirements and grant activities could be and would be a factor, or I should say non-compliance could be a factor in the outcome of this grant process. Okay, next question. If you are currently receiving funding from JF&A that ends in March 2024, and you have a new innovative idea for a new grant from 2024 to 2026, can you apply for that? Yes, if you meet the eligibility requirements, then you are eligible to apply. Sustainability. If we say that we would like projects to be sustainable, do we mean during the years while we receive JF&A grant funding or after the grant period is over? Well, certainly while you're receiving funding, it should be sustainable. If it's not, then there's some bigger problems. But after the JF&A funding ends, we would like for you to make all reasonable efforts to set it up in a way that it could be sustainable. Or even a version of it sustainable. What we don't want to see is services given to a certain population, and this population comes to rely on them, and then services taken away if JF&A funding ends. So that's what we mean by sustainable. We want to make sure that your clients are protected because really our JF&A funding is not sustainable. This is a 2-year grant program, but as it says in multiple places in the RFP, all this funding depends on the availability of federal funds. And so if Congress does not appropriate the funding for year 2, then we don't have the funding for year 2. We fully expect that Congress would appropriate it, but we need to make sure that that your clients and your population is taken care of nevertheless. Okay. Where is a list of prior grant awardees? You can find that on our website on agingandtrauma.org. Can the match be operating costs of facility like occupancy? I don't really understand what that means, but if you want to email your question to us, then we can answer that question about the match by email. If a nursing home or assisted living facility delivers the innovative PCTI project, can the staff salaries of the staff delivering the projects be covered in this grant? Salaries can be covered in this grant, but not salaries that would be covered by other sources of funding. So if there's a new hire, or if funding is done in such a way that you need to supplement salary to be able to deliver this specific project, then that's certainly allowable. But the idea, the concept is not to supplant salaries of people who are doing existing work. Next question. For projects that are brand new, can we anticipate that costs in year 1 would be different than in year 2, in that startup costs may be more than continuation costs in the following year? Yes. And certainly we have seen costs being, having expenses, having different expenses in year 1 than in year 2. We do have a process for carrying over funds from year 1 to year 2. It is not that is not something that we want you to rely on. We want you to set up a budget that is consistent between year 1 and year 2. But the particular expenses, the line items might be different. Next question. What types of reporting questions will you be asking on the quarterly reports? And will they be consistent with other JF&A grants in the past? Yes, I would say they will be consistent. There might be some differences here and there. We do make improvements to our reporting forms, largely based on your feedback and how they're used, but largely consistent. Would improvements to an existing program be eligible? Yes, but you need to really demonstrate what is new, what is expanded, what is different, what is innovative about the improvement. These questions just keep coming, and every time a new question comes, it changes the order. So bear with me. Is each project discussed in one grant proposal required to have a direct service component? I think the answer is no. There is a place in the RFP that refers to it. If one of my team members could quickly scan the RFP and see where that's described, I think there is a place where we said that at least one of the projects has to have that direct service component to the service population, but that not all of them have to. So if someone could look that up or just confirm my memory.
Shelley, you're right that if at least one of the projects has to be for the direct service for the service populations, the other projects could be for the supporters of support of the service populations.
Thank you. Next question. If an organization serves only one or two of the service populations listed, are we still eligible to apply, or do we need to explicitly serve all three populations? You do not need to explicitly serve all three populations. You actually only need to serve one, but you can serve 1, 2, or 3 of the service populations. Okay. Can an office that doesn't oversee direct services, but is housed in a state agency that does provide direct services apply? Do projects have to include direct service delivery, or can they focus on projects to support professionals providing direct services? I think this is a different version of that same question. First, again, I would point to the eligibility section in the RFP. At least one of the project must include direct services to one of the service populations. If none of the projects serve one of the service populations, then that wouldn't be a proposal for this grant. But if one of the projects does serve a direct service to the service population, and another one of the projects serves support professionals providing direct services, then that's okay. If a project pilot was tested on a very small scale, but now funding is needed to fully implement, is this still considered innovative? Probably it depends. If the pilot project was innovative in the first place, then it would be. But the onus would be on the applicant to describe what is innovative about this project and why is it necessary and innovative for your community. Okay, a question about the funding schedule. Do we mean that a portion of the funds is provided at the beginning and then other half at mid-year? And budget reports support the ability to spend the funds according to the original proposal? The funding schedule may not be exactly equal months, but we'll provide a schedule that would be logical for the overall grant and for when JFNA needs to spend the money and when we need to get the money out. But your budget reports will be tied to future payments of the funding. So for example, if your organization has received funding and has not spent all or most of it, and it's time for, according to the schedule, it's time for the next payment, we would hold that payment until you spend down the money that you already have. The government does not allow for us or for our subgrantees to be holding on to federal funds. So you do need to make sure that they're being spent according to schedule. In requiring that we serve older adults with a history of trauma, what is the definition of trauma that we use? And do we require you to determine and specify the type of trauma for each person? There actually is no singular definition of trauma. Trauma is the result of an event. Trauma results from experiencing or witnessing or hearing about or knowing about something that could cause an impact. And we don't ask, we don't know and we don't ask what type of trauma a person has undergone. We actually believe that the person-centered trauma-informed approach to care is universal and could be universal. And all of the principles that we ascribe to in SAMHSA's definition of a trauma-informed program. Principles like safety and empowerment and voice and choice, those apply to everyone. And so even if a person doesn't have a history of trauma, those principles still apply. We also know that the research tells us that up to 90% of older adults have experienced at least one traumatic event. And so by that, we want to make sure that the person-centered trauma-informed approach is indeed universally applied. So we do not ask for a definition of trauma. In the application, we do ask, about the experience and the history of the service population and why you want to serve them. So that would be a good place to describe that population's history. Next question. Is there a minimum number of individuals that we need to serve in one or more of the service populations? How does the number impact the probability of receiving the grants? Great question. There is not a minimum number of individuals that we need to serve. However, know that your proposal will be competitive. Leah mentioned that we always receive more applications than we're able to fund, and review committee members do want to see that there is a good return on the investment in terms of in terms of the amount of funding that is provided. If it should match, so to speak. So if you're requiring a whole lot of funding and not serving a lot of people, that is less of a match than if you're requesting a lot of funding and serving a lot of people. Just make sure that the program and the goals in the budget match. Okay. I think I answered all of the questions. Here's a duplicate question. If you've received JF&A funding in the past for PCTI programs, are you eligible? Yes, as long as you meet all of the eligibility requirements.
Are there any other questions? Feel free to type them now. We want to make sure we answer all of them. And if you still have questions for more details, you would just write aging@jewishfederations.org.
Someone asked if an agency can submit more than one application. No, that is what Leah meant by your organization can really only be part of one application. You can't submit two or more. And if you are applying, you also wouldn't be able to be on another application listed as a sub grantee or vice versa. So one application per organization. I think those are all of the questions so far. Again, if you have other clarifying questions like this, please email them to us at aging@jewishfederations.org by February 24th. We will not be able to answer questions after February 24th because we need to be fair to all applicants. We will be posting all of the answers that we described today, and we will also be posting any answers to questions that come into us before February 24th. And we'll have those on our website as soon as possible after that deadline. We're also going to post the recording of this session on our website, so it's available for you or for any applicants that may have missed this info session. I want to reiterate something that Leah said at the beginning. Please get your intent to apply in by the deadline. That is 1 week from today, the 16th, February 16th. That intent to apply, it's a form. It's like your name, your address, phone number. It's very simple, and kind of a checkbox for eligibility. You don't need to know what your project is going to be about. You don't need to know your service population. You don't really need to know any details about the project. Or you don't need to tell us, I should say. But you do need to fill out that letter of intent form or intent to apply form. That is a hard and fast deadline. If you do not fill out the intent to apply form by the deadline, you will not be eligible to submit a full application. We use those intents in order for us to form a review committee, we need to know about how many applications we'll be receiving. And we always know that there are a number of organizations that submit their intent to apply and don't follow through with the full application for various reasons. We understand that. So if there's any chance at all that you think you want to apply for this program, go ahead, and you can even do it right now. It should take you 5 minutes or less, really. Just submit that form for the intent to apply.
Thank you, Shelley. You did a masterful job of managing all those questions. Abby, would you please go back to the slideshow? So the next steps is read the section 1.3 of the Innovations Program RFP and Program Guidelines to determine whether your agency is eligible to apply. Next is create an account and log into Foundant Technologies to submit an intent to apply. It's also called an LOI by February 16th. If you are not interested in applying for this grant, but would like more information about trainings on aging and trauma, feel free to write aging@jewishfederations.org, and we'll put you on our mailing list for future webinars. Also, if you have questions about the content of the RFP and program guidelines, and like Shelley said, not about ideas, it would not be fair for us to brainstorm with sites, whether you're a current subgrantee or never been funded before. We really try to be transparent and fair to everybody. But if you have questions about the content of the RFP, write aging@jewishfederations.org. And finally, you can check out our website, agingandtrauma.org, in mid-March to read the FAQ sheet. And also that's where the intent to apply can be found as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really grateful for your time, and we hope you'll pass this along to other sites. We really would hope to have a robust cohort to be leaders in this field of trauma and aging. Thank you.